Alright, today we're going to learn about a new little trick called out of bounds photography. Sometimes they call it OOB photography. Basically, this is a little trick that we're going to do to make some photographs more interesting. It also kind of helps us practice with our layers and layer masks. We're involved, I think, at least 3 or 4 different layers to do this. So let me just show you some examples of what out of bounds photography actually is. Basically, it's a little kind of a gimmick, a little trick to make a photograph look like something is coming out of the picture. Obviously, the picture is the entire background that you see from here. The brown to white is the actual picture, but by putting a picture kind of within a picture and putting a little frame around it, it kind of doesn't really fool the eye, but it kind of gives you a neat little way of looking at a photograph in a little different way. This is one example of just taking a little cat and having him come out of the picture. Here's a picture of someone on a slide. And they've taken a slide and actually, obviously the actual photograph was everything you see here. Not the background, but the entire slide was actually the original photograph. That one's a little bit too much. It's more out of bounds than it is actually inbound, so I'm not sure that one quite works as well. Sometimes they actually take multiple photographs. Here they've kind of pretended like the top was one photo and the bottom was another photograph, and he's kind of sliding into the second one. So sometimes you see it with 2 photographs. And here's another pretty good example of when you'd use it is, to make something look bigger than it actually was or more interesting. And here we have the Great Wall of China, and it's actually coming out of the picture. And again, the actual picture, if you can't figure this out, was actually the entire wall. And we're going to kind of change things around to make it look like this this technique, out of bounds photography. So I've got an image here that we're going to start with. It is a dog. And this picture is of a dog jumping off. There's actually 2 dogs jumping off this dock. I typically look for photographs to do this that have motion in them. Obviously, they don't have to have motion because, as you can see, it could be just a wall that's not really moving. But sometimes it's interesting to have something that's actually moving and jumping, or like the slide where it's actually coming out. So here's what we're going to do. Now, this does take 3 or 4 layers and several different steps. So you might have to watch this one twice to really get these steps down, but I'll kind of go slow and hopefully you can figure out what we're doing. The first step is to get a frame, a fake frame in our picture. And the way we're going to do that is I'm just going to, and I already have several layers where I've already been working to save some time later on, but I'm just going to hit a new layer, and I'm going to make it transparent. And this is going to be, I'm going to go ahead and label this. This is going to be our frame layer. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my selection tool, and you have to figure out exactly where you want your frame to be. Now, in most photographs using open out-of-bounds photography, they kind of have this fake 3D look, meaning that the photograph is kind of sideways or laying down on a table, things like that. So what we're going to do is we're going to kind of select maybe this much of the photo, and I'm intentionally having the part where the dog is, coming out of the picture not selected. Okay, so remember that he's not. I don't want him selected. This is the part where you have some play with. You can design it however you want it to do. I'm going to go here to select. Haven't shown you this step in a long time. I think maybe the very first day we talked about this briefly. But border allows me to create a border of what I just selected. I'm going to do mine a little bit smaller than I did last time, maybe 15 pixels. There is no right or wrong border size here. It's just the size of the border that you want to create. And you can see what it created there. Again, I'm still in my layer. It's selected. I'm going to go to white paint, and I'm just going to fill it with white. Oh, can't see it because it's below it, so I'm going to move it up again. Again, I can't move with this program, so there we go. So I have this fake frame, so to speak, now. Now, we could just continue with it flat like this, but again, a lot of them have kind of a distorted or fake 3D look, and the way we're going to accomplish that is with this, what's called the perspective tool. I believe it is right here, this perspective tool. So when I click on that and then click on my layer, I get these handles that can move around, and you can see how it's kind of distorting the layer. I'm going to pretend like this photograph is on a wall, and I'm kind of looking at it, and it's kind of going away from me, so it's going to get smaller. So I'm going to kind of grab my handles here in the corners here, And I'm just going to pull them so they look kind of like that. You can see they show you the original and the final at the same time, so you know exactly what it's going to look like. Again, you can play with this and move this around in several other ways. But once I perform it, I have this kind of this fake 3D look now. You can see that the image is kind of like it's looking away from me. Okay, now the next step is I want to remove all of this part of the image except the dog. But don't change it. Don't change the original picture. We're going to leave that just like it is. So if you can't figure this out, we're going to use layer mask to do this. So I'm going to add a layer mask. I'm going to start with white and grab my black paint, and probably going to need a bigger brush than that. And there's really no shortcut here. You're just going to have to start painting. And again, you're going to paint everything out here except for the dog. Don't paint the dog out, because he's actually part of the important part of the picture. Now here's a neat little thing here. Because this frame is on top of all this, I don't have to be very particular. See, I can go very quickly through there because it's going underneath that white frame. You see, just don't go into the picture. But as long as I stay in the frame and out, I don't have to be very particular there. Now to save time, I would continue painting all this blue out so that you see none of that. To save time, I've actually already done this. So I'm going to turn those two off and turn this one on. Let me disable that real quick here. Okay, that's what it's going to look like. On this one, I finished painting around the dog, and you can see that he still doesn't look like he's coming out completely because of this white frame here. So really the last, well, not the last step, but almost the last step, is to add a layer mask to that layer. Now I could use the eraser, but again, I like that non-destructive technique, so I'm going to use a layer mask. I've actually already done this step as well, so I'm just going to re-enable the layer mask. Now the key here is to really get, and I missed a little bit right there. In fact, let me see if I can tweak that a little bit. This is why non-destructive is good, because I made a little mistake there. You can see there's a little tiny section where he does not, the white does not completely go where the dog should have been. So I can go back and get that a little bit closer there. The key is to get a nice edge right there, because you're trying to make it look like the dog is actually jumping in front of that. And it doesn't really look great up here, but I don't want to take any more time to spend. Well, I guess I actually did just spend more time, but anyway, still not quite. But from a distance, it doesn't look too bad. So we've removed it, and the last step is really just to have a background. He looks, the whole picture's floating, so we need a background so that the whole picture is floating. And typically what I do is I can just create another blank layer, and we can call this background layer background of photo, something like that. It really doesn't matter what we put on it, because I'm going to grab two colors. Again, you pick the colors, doesn't really matter. I'll just do red to black, and I'm going to do a gradient on this layer, and I'm just going to go something like that. You can see I've missed a few spots down here. Let me go back and clean that up just a little bit if I can. Get a little bigger. Okay, little white spots down here. And the background is just so it kind of sets it and gives it some dimension. Again, this is a very hastily done. Typically what they'll do also, and I don't want to get into this, that involves a few more steps, is to create kind of a shadow around the picture. That gives it even more kind of 3D perspective. But this is just a quick example of out-of-bounds photography. Again, you can do it to almost any photograph. You can even do multiple of these frames, as you saw in that one example. A person going from one photograph into another photograph, or things like that. So there's a lot of little ways you can use this. Again, it's a little gimmicky, but it does practice layers. As you can see, it does require a background layer. It requires the layer that we use the mask on, the actual dog's layer, and then the frame. And normally I would have actually added a shadow underneath that one. That would be an additional layer. So again, this is called out-of-bounds photography. It is, if you look online, you'll see several examples of, and even, I did not take the time again on this one, but instead of doing a white border, sometimes they'll actually go out and get a frame. I don't think any of them did that. No, they're all just white. But instead of having just a white box here, they'll actually go out and get an actual, frame that you'd actually see a real picture in. real decorative frame, and they'll put that in there instead, and that will give it even more of a realistic, like it's on the wall, so to speak. So, out of bound photography in this video.